Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I make videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. We're in week 11 of our Winging It project for 2025, Pick of the Pots. This is a project where each week I take a pick out of my 3 plant pots. One contains colours, the second contains shapes and the third contains stitches. And we use these as prompts to create a piece of improvised textile art to go in our Winging It 2025 book. You can do as much or as little of this project as you like. If there's a week that catches your eye, then go for it. Please don't feel like you have to do them all, but if you want to join in each week, that's great too. We do have a private Facebook group and there are details in the description below, along with a bunch of other links to my other social media and our website, where we also sell embroidery kits to help you keep on stitching beyond this project. Now that all of that is out of the way, I am going to head into my studio and let's get picking.
Right, here we go again with our week 11 pick. So I'm going to start the timer so that you can see I'm not cheating, and we're going to have a bit of a dig around. Let's mix them up a bit and take our pick for this week. So first of all, our colour is lime green. Oh, brilliant, perfect for spring. And let's have another pick. We have got a equilateral triangle, that's our shape, and the leaves are out then. And what's our stitch going to be? Let's have a look. Oh, Kantha. Right, so this is more of a style of embroidery, so it's going to be fundamentally running stitch today. I think let's have a think about it while I gather some bits and pieces. Yeah, so let's get rid of our pots. We have lime green, equilateral triangle and Kantha style embroidery. So Kantha is lots of lines of running stitch very close together, and you can take them in all sorts of directions. You can turn them into shapes or designs, but we're going to focus on equilateral triangles. I'm going to have a bit of a think while I gather my bits and pieces, and then we'll create something. I'm not going to demonstrate the stitch because it is just running stitch, but I'll see if I can find some examples of Kantha style embroidery to show you. Okay, I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've got a couple of examples of Kantha embroidery here. These are both Angela Damon kits, and Angela Damon specifically focuses on Kantha stitching, and it's basically lines of running stitch that are closely stitched together. So we've got some very loose lines in the background. This is her winter hair kit, and this is a much closer representation of Kantha or Kantha embroidery. It's an embroidery tradition from India, and this was a style of embroidery where old and worn out fabrics were reused, so lots and lots of lines of stitching to make something very decorative, usually out of old saris and old cottons and worn fabrics that have worn out, and historically it was a way of reusing and repairing very precious fabric that was expensive and shouldn't be thrown away. So this is more like the effect. I have got another one. So this is one that I made for my mum. This is much more closely Kantha embroidery, and we've got, these are done with variegated threads, and we've got this lovely effect. And because the stitches are worked in shapes, you actually get a three-dimensional effect, and it really sort of transforms the way that the object that you're stitching looks. So we've got some in the background here done in stripes to create these hills, but this creates a much denser coverage and creates colour, but it also creates form. So there's loads, just Google it, have a look at some different examples of Kantha embroidery, and so that's what we're going to go for. So I want to show you how to draw an equilateral triangle so that it's definitely an equilateral triangle. I've just got a bit of card here, and I want to draw a line that is about the right size. So I've got my lime green felt here. We're working on a 7.5 or 7 centimetre frame. So I reckon 2 centimetres, half centimetre, 2 centimetres, half centimetre, 2 centimetres. That will balance things out a little bit. So I'm going for a 2 centimetre base on my triangle. So I'm just going to draw a line that is 2 centimetres long. I don't know, what's that? Just about 3/4 of an inch, I suppose. And you need a pair of compasses for this. And I want to put the point of my compasses on one end, and you need to line up your pencil tip with the other end of the line, like that. And I'm going to start on the right hand side, and what I want to do is just make an arc with my pencil, so just nice and pale. Got the point of my compass on the end of the line, and I've just made an arc there, and then I'm going to switch back to the other end of the line, and I'm going to make another arc. So an equilateral triangle is 3 equal sides, and all of the internal angles are 60 degrees. So I've just got my 2 arcs there, and I want to find the point where they cross each other, like that. And then I join up my end of the line with the crossing point, and then the other end of the line with the crossing point. Try to be as accurate as possible, like that. And there's my equilateral triangle. That's going to be my template. So I did a bit of research on traditional Kantha designs that include triangles, and the same thing kept coming up, and it's a kind of flying geese. There's my little template, so that's going to fit quite nicely on here. It's going to be totally flat, this one. It's going to be a nice flat one to help with the thickness of our book. You can use Bondaweb for this. I think I'm going to risk not using it. I may live to regret it. I've found a bunch of lime green fabrics. This one's going to be a nightmare. I might have to put some interfacing on the back of that. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. So this is lightweight iron-on interfacing, and it's a little bit like Bondaweb, I suppose, in that it is a glue. So if I bring it up really close, you should be able to see little dots all over it. Now they are dots of glue, and so when you press it, that glue melts and fuses to your fabric. Now with Bondaweb, there's a paper layer, and it's like a glue mesh. So you iron it on one way, flip it over, peel the paper off, and then iron it again, and then the glue fuses on both sides. But this has got like a fibre mesh on the back, so those dots are only on one side of the interfacing, and there's a fibre mesh on the back. It's great for stabilising fabrics that are likely to fray, and this one you can see it's just shredding, so this one is likely to fray. So I've just got a little bit of interfacing here, probably too much. Waste not, want not. And I'm just going to fuse that, so just a medium iron. You can use parchment if you like, just to protect your iron. I'm just going to press over that, and that will fuse the interfacing to the fabric, and so I'll be able to cut it without it fraying too much. So I've just cooled that down a little bit, and I want to draw around my template. You can just cut direct if you want to, but I'm just going to draw around my template a few times, and I'm going to cut out a bunch of triangles. Now they will tessellate, so that will cut down on how many lines you need to draw and how much cutting you need to do. So you just line them up together. Could turn your triangles into hexagons if you wanted to, but I'm just going to stick with the triangles. We're going to make a kind of flying geese design. I'm going to try and stick with odd numbers, so I'm going to start with 5, and if we need more I can always come back and cut some more. So just going to go up the side along that top edge, along the bottom, and then I can just cut along those joining lines. So I'm going to repeat that with all the other fabrics that I've found, and then we'll put our little panel together. Okay, here we go. I've got a fabric glue pen here, and this is just going to help me fix things in place until I'm ready to stitch. So all I'm going to do is put a dab of glue on the back and place my triangle, and then I'm going to just pick another triangle, dab of glue, and we want to position it directly above the previous one. I don't really want a pattern. I don't want the same triangles next to each other, but I'm gonna do a different order on my other lines. So flying geese is a traditional quilt pattern, and it's made of triangles. They're normally not equilateral triangles, they're squatter and wider, but this one works quite well for what we're doing here. So I want a little gap like that, and let's put a third one just to make sure we've got even lines. So this one is super simple. I'm trying to be fairly random. in the way I'm picking up pieces. Just to get a balance of the different fabrics. You can draw some vertical lines on if you want to make sure you are keeping your lines straight, but I'm just eyeballing it. Because they tessellate, if you wanted to, you could come back in the opposite direction if you want, but I like the felt showing through, and that's much more like a traditional flying geese pattern. And I quite like the idea of it being a traditional pattern because Kantha is so traditional as well. It's such a sort of iconic style of stitch that I think having a traditional pattern with a traditional style of stitch works quite nicely. So these will all be kept for later projects. I've got a couple of threads. I actually don't have that much lime green, it turns out. I've got this really lovely variegated thread. It has got a bit of turquoise in it, but it is primarily shades of lime green. I really love that, and I love the effect of variegated thread in Kantha as well. I've got another sheepish thread. This is called Lime. It's a little bit yellow for my liking, and I might save that. It's also very thick, and I think it's going to cover up too much of our fabric. I've also got a pearl cotton here, which is a little bit thinner, so I think I'm going to stick with these two. All my green stranded cottons are a little bit muted, and I wanted to keep this really nice and zingy. So I now want to draw a pattern on, and could draw another equilateral triangle and stitch around it, but I wanted to kind of provide a bit of contrast, so I think I'm going to do a sort of swirl. I'm just going to put one line in. You don't have to draw anything if you don't want to. You can totally eyeball it. But I wanted a bit of a guide. I'm going to come down a bit lower with that one, I think. And let's make it cross over here, like that. So we're going to follow this line and just stitch loads of lines of running stitch and work our way across this way and up this way, so everything is going to be covered in stitch. Let's start with, it's going to be easiest for you to see. Let's start with a bit of this. So with Kantha, we want to keep our running stitches relatively small, and we want the gaps between the stitches to be smaller than the length of the stitches themselves. So I'm starting in the corner. My pieces are going to move a little bit until there's plenty of stitching down. So I'm going to running stitch along that line. And when I get to a fabric piece, I'm just going to stitch straight over the top. Now the traditional Kantha designs that I've seen with triangles tend to have vertical lines of stitching to attach all of the triangles down, but I quite like mixing it up a little bit. I like the contrast of the curves with all the straight lines. A bit more playful. And it's worth taking your time with your first line because it's going to set the tone for all your other lines of stitching. So how this first line goes, all the other lines are going to follow it. So make sure you're happy with your curves and you're happy with the length of stitching and things like that. I've used glue. I don't often use glue on fabric, but each one of these would have to have a pin in it, and that's just not going to be pleasant to stitch at all. So that's why I've used a dab of glue instead. It's just enough to hold things down while we're working. So at the end of the line, I'm going to go through to the back. That's my first line. And then I want to move along ever so slightly, so just a couple of millimeters. And I'm going to go back in the opposite direction, trying to match up my stitches, but they won't match precisely because we've got concave curves which are going to take fewer stitches to go around, and then these convex curves which are going to take more stitches to get around. There's a greater distance there, so you can line them up as best as you can, but the effect will be similar whether you line them up or not. If you line them up, you're going to get these little sort of ridged furrows in between, but sometimes it's nice to not have that and just keep the stitching a little bit more uneven. So I think I'm going to do 5 lines in this pearl cotton down the centre, and then I'll do the rest in the variegated, I think. And I might only use a single strand of that because this is going to look quite chunky. It's a chunky thread and it's sort of going down the centre of the design. I want something maybe a little bit finer so we don't lose the sense of the triangles underneath. So we'll do this feature band of stitch and then we'll loosen it up a little bit. So that's our first 2 lines. I'm just going to move along a little way and do the same again. Okay, here's my finished panel. I really like this one. It's so simple, so effective. I feel like it looks like a sort of abstract forest with a path running through it. I think it's just lovely, and that variegated thread just adds a little pop of something different every now and again just to lift it. So it's just such an effective technique, and I love the stitch. I love stitching over patchwork or fabric that's laid out like this. So I've done my running stitch border and I've trimmed it back, so we just need to put it into our book now. So that was last week's. Let's put some glue on the page. And press that in. We can put in our date, which is the 16th of the 3rd, 25. I think that's right, yes it is. And let's pop our picks on the back. So lime green was our colour. Equilateral triangle was our shape. And Kantha was our stitch. And there we go. So that is our lime green piece for this week. I really hope you've enjoyed that. Really looking forward to seeing what you create. Don't forget you can share in our Facebook group, and I'll put information and a link to that in the description below. If you're sharing on Instagram, don't forget to use hashtag FSHWingingIt2025. And if you tag me at Feather Stitch House, I'm much more likely to see your creations. Thanks so much for watching this week. I really hope you have a great week stitching your lime green piece, and I will be back next week for another video. Take care, happy stitching, and I will see you soon. Bye.